I'm Beth and I'm working with Clifton Cameras to bring you guys a bit of a beginner's guide on flying the DJI Mini 4 Pro. In this beginner's guide, we're going to be going over your first flight, how to use the controller, launching and landing, some flight tips, and I'm also going to talk a little bit about laws and safety of flying a drone. So I've been playing around with this drone for the last couple of months, and I've gotten well acquainted with it, so I've got a few bits of advice on how to start off with flying this drone. It's a perfect drone for beginners. It's really small, really lightweight, and as it sits under that 250 gram weight limit, you don't have to register it with the CAA, so it feels a little bit less daunting to start off with this drone. What I love about this setup, this is the combo setup, is that you get this RC2 controller with it. As you can see, there's a really big screen, it's really bright, and it's really easy to use. So as soon as you turn on this drone for the first time and pair it with your controller, you'll have to create a DJI account and you'll just log into it on the app. And as soon as you open that app, it will take you through a full tutorial on how to operate this drone. I'm going to take you through how to use this controller. So here's where you can switch between your recording modes. So you've got photo, video, master shots, hyperlapse, quick shots and pano. There's some really cool modes on here and like automated modes, which I love. I'll show you a few of the quick shots now. So here you've got your playback mode, so you can see what you've shot. You can split it into photos, videos, and you can mark some of your favourites as well. So by clicking these three dots in the corner, you open your system settings. So let's go through a few safety things. You've got your obstacle avoidance settings, so you can choose whether to brake or bypass if your drone senses an obstacle, or you can turn it off. And it actually automatically turns off in sport mode as well. That's something to note. But yeah, only if you're experienced, I'd turn it off. So here you can set your return to home altitude. Make sure that it's appropriate for how you're landing it, so you don't want any obstacles in the way there. You don't really want to rely on obstacle avoidance for that, just give that extra bracket of safety there. So you can set your max altitude, which you know in the rules is 120 metres, and your max distance away. It's good to have these as a bit of a warning because they pop up on the screen. So you can calibrate your compass, which it will warn you if you do need to do that. So into the control settings, just a few bits to personalise your flying experience really. You just have to go through all of these and kind of set them to your personal needs. You will learn a bit more about these settings. So you can customise buttons like this, which I love. So you've got those wheels on the top, which zoom in and out and tilt as default, but you can set them to whatever. So your camera settings, you can choose your video formats, your coding format, and other settings, but like I said, these default settings that it comes in are perfect to get you going really. Let's go through some of the camera settings. So you can leave it in auto if you're beginning with photography and film, but you can change a few things when you're getting more comfortable with the settings, such as your frame rate and the quality that you're recording in. And this is how you turn it into the pro settings. So this is where you can change your exposure, so aperture, shutter speed, ISO. And then you can choose like where you record your data to, so your SD card or internal storage. This is your launch button if you do want automated launching. So here you can flick between your modes on the controller. So you can flick to cine mode, which will make your shots super cinematic and slow. Or you can switch to sport mode, which you can go super quickly, but it will turn your obstacle avoidance off. And then back to normal. That up there is your return to home button. So let's talk you through the flight itself. So you're turning the drone on, you've got your single click and your double click as a hold until these lights come up and you can see your props just juddering there. You've got your lights coming on, and these are your status lights, so they should turn green for when you're ready to fly. Let's turn on the controller, so the same process, that double click and holding on that second click. So you can see the camera view here. So you've got both sticks here, down into the middle, and then lift off, your left stick goes up. So here's the drone hovering. So you've launched, you're set up a couple of meters in the air, and I just like to do a quick test flight to see that the drone's operating as it should. So a little rotate such as this. And I also just like to fly a couple of feet to the left, to the right, up and down, just to see if everything looks smooth. You've got your drone up in the air, so let's go over the controls. On your left-hand joystick, you've got up, down and rotate. And then on your right-hand joystick, you've got left, right, forwards and backwards. And then on the back of the remote, you've got some wheels, which you can customise and set yourself. You've got your tilt on there. So we've gone over launching, but let's land. So to land, super simple, you're just pushing the left stick down and you keep that stick down until it's fully grounded. So it will pause when it's coming down, when you've got your left stick down, and it will hover when it's a few feet from the floor, but just keep the stick down, power through, and it will come down. It's just a bit of a safety procedure there. Let's go through the most important rules for flying this specific sub 250 gram drone and a few safety tips. So during your flight, you need to keep the drone within what the Civil Aviation Authority define as visual line of sight. This means you have to be able to see the drone at all times. So your maximum altitude is 120 metres, and that limit can be set in the safety settings as well that we looked at through the remote. So if you get caught up and you're just going up and you get really excited, it just reminds you, it comes up as a warning, you're capped at 120 metres. So there's no definite rule here, but I suggest that you stand at least 5 metres back whilst launching and landing. The propellers, even on this tiny drone, can do serious damage. So if something goes wrong, it's just best to keep your distance. So just a few safety notes. If your drone loses signal to the remote, so maybe if you've gone too far away, you've flown out of visual line of sight, which shouldn't happen, but maybe you have to during an emergency, or maybe your drone's been blown away by the wind, it will fly back towards your takeoff point. So try not to panic. It will bring itself back to your home point. But this is a setting you can change actually. You can also set the drone to hover in place if it loses signal, if you prefer. So, for example, I've done this in the past when I've been flying from a moving boat. So obviously I wouldn't want the drone to go back where I launched because we wouldn't be there anymore and it would land straight in the sea. Okay, so set your return to home flight to a suitable height. So I mentioned this earlier. But you need to set this height to be high enough to clear any obstacles on the path back to your home point. So obviously you've got obstacle avoidance, but you don't always want to rely on that. So best to just set that height to an appropriate height. Obstacle avoidance is such a brilliant technology on these drones and perfect for you beginners. So in the settings I showed you, you can select whether the drone bypasses an obstacle, so if it moves around it, or if the drone just stops to a hover, so whatever you prefer there. You can turn it off as well, but I wouldn't recommend this until you're very comfortable with flying, or if it's required to turn off. For example, like when you're in sport mode, it's turned off automatically. On the DJI Flight App, it will tell you if you're in a recommended flight zone. So basically, if it's legal to fly where you're taking off at the moment. I really recommend paying attention to this because, for example, like you could be in a military airspace without knowing. And if you're flying in that zone and someone finds out, you can get in a lot of trouble. Also, make sure you're not flying on private land without permission as well. Make sure you're flying in suitable conditions. So the wind shouldn't be higher than 23 miles per hour, according to DJI. But I always just think about, is it worth it to be flying in these high winds with the potential to lose this drone? Like, is your shot that important with the potential of losing this drone in the wind? Also, I'd recommend to fly it in no rain, possibly very light rain if you have to. But again, it's risky, as that threshold isn't really definitive. I hope this has been a really useful beginner's guide for you into how to fly the DJI Mini 4 Pro. This is a great drone, it's so brilliant for beginners, and I really hope you get on with it. But if you do have any other questions, then please just leave a comment below or get in touch with Clifton Cameras and I, and we'll try and answer as best we can.